It arrived like a viper slipping silently into my mailbox. An invoice. Thick, creamy paper, embossed lettering from a boutique so expensive it made my eyes water just looking at the logo. A place I hadn't set foot in for nearly a year. But it wasn't addressed to me, Sarah Hayes. No, it was addressed to Chloe Vance. At my address. My home. The one I'd meticulously decorated, filled with memories. The home my husband Mark and I had built together. Tucked inside, nestled against the obscene total for silk dresses and ridiculously tiny handbags, was a note. Mark's handwriting. That familiar, confident script that used to write me love notes, now twisted into something sharp and cruel. Thought you might want to see what real happiness looks like, Sarah. Enjoy your half of the emptiness. The sheer, calculated cruelty of it stole my breath. He thought he was landing a killing blow, flaunting his affair, his upgrade to a younger model, rubbing my nose in the ashes of our marriage. He wanted me to feel discarded, worthless, surrounded by the hollow echoes of our life. He had absolutely no idea. None. That this piece of paper, this arrogant display, it wasn't a weapon against me. It was the trigger. The final piece of evidence I needed to unleash a storm he never saw coming. Because buried deep in the legalese of our prenuptial agreement, a document he'd dismissed as a formality was a clause. A very specific, very carefully worded clause. And thanks to his little shopping spree for Chloe, she wasn't just enjoying the emptiness with him. Oh no, she was about to find out she owed me everything. Stick around. Because the emptiness he bragged about, it was about to get very, very full of consequences he couldn't afford. Before the viper arrived, before the world tilted on its axis, life felt meticulously constructed. Secure. I'm Sarah, and for as long as I can remember, building that security was my driving force. I wasn't handed anything, I earned it. As a woman navigating the sharp elbows and glass ceilings of the finance world, I'd poured my 20s and early 30s into my career. Long hours, calculated risks, smart investments. I built my foundation brick by painstaking brick. I had my own portfolio, my own apartment, my own future mapped out before Mark even entered the picture. Meeting him felt like finding the missing piece. He was magnetic, ambitious, with a smile that could charm a room. Working in a related field, we spoke the same language, understood the pressures, the drive. He seemed to genuinely admire my independence, my success. He wasn't intimidated, he said it excited him. We talked for hours, nights blending into mornings, sketching out a future where we were partners, equals, building an empire side by side. Our wedding was elegant, tasteful, a celebration of two established lives joining forces. We bought the house together, a beautiful colonial in a leafy, established neighborhood. It wasn't ostentatious, but it represented everything we'd worked for. Thought. Comfortable. Ours. Our life settled into a rhythm that felt both comfortable and invigorating. Morning coffee brewed just the way he liked it before we both rushed off to demanding jobs. Weekend hikes exploring nearby trails, breathing fresh air, momentarily escaping the city's relentless pace. Cozy evenings debating market fluctuations or planning our next trip. A vineyard tour in Tuscany, maybe diving in Belize. I handled our joint long-term financial strategy. It was my world, my expertise. Mark always seemed content, even relieved, to let me manage it. You're the genius, Sarah, he'd say, flashing that charming smile. Just tell me where to sign. Looking back, the ease with which he deferred felt less like trust and more like disinterest. A willful ignorance, perhaps. Our routines were the scaffolding of our life. Sunday brunch, monthly dinners with coupled friends, quiet nights watching documentaries. It was stable. Predictable, yes, but in a way that felt grounding, safe. I felt cherished, respected, part of an unbreakable team. That sense of unwavering stability, it was the bedrock. I truly believed nothing could shake it. I had no idea the fault lines were already forming, hidden just beneath the polished surface. The first tremor wasn't a quake, just a faint vibration, easily dismissed. Mark started working late more frequently. At first, I accepted his explanations readily. This new quarter launch is brutal, Sarah, he'd sigh, dropping his briefcase by the door, radiating exhaustion. We're understaffed and the pressure is immense. I'd make him dinner, listen sympathetically, rub the tension from his shoulders. But the late nights became the norm, not the exception. Then there was the phone. His constant companion. It started buzzing more often with texts that made him angle the screen away instinctively, even if I was just walking past. Calls were increasingly taken in his study, the door firmly closed. Just a client needing hand-holding, he'd say vaguely, emerging minutes later with a distracted air. The excuses felt thin. Like a poorly patched wall, the cracks were starting to show. And then her name surfaced. Chloe. A new analyst on his team. She's incredibly bright, he mentioned one evening over dinner, perhaps a little too enthusiastically. Young, full of energy, really shaking things up with fresh perspectives. He praised her work ethic, her innovative ideas. It felt slightly forced, like he was preemptively justifying the amount of time they were clearly spending together. A tiny alarm bell, muffled by years of trust, began to ring faintly in the back of my mind. Was I being insecure? Reading too much into it? I hated the thought of being that wife, the suspicious one. I tried to push it down. Mark and I had history, a foundation. Surely I was just stressed, projecting my own work anxieties. But the little inconsistencies piled up, like pebbles dislodged by a slow-moving current. He started paying more attention to his appearance. New, sharper suits appeared in his closet. He bought expensive cologne, something muskier, more assertive than his usual subtle scent. He started going to the gym more often, focusing on weights. Just want to stay healthy, he'd shrug when I commented. But it felt different. Performative. Then came the credit card anomalies. Small things at first. Lunches at trendier, pricier spots than his usual sandwich at the desk routine. A charge for after-work drinks at a sleek cocktail bar I knew his usual work buddies didn't frequent. When I casually asked about them, he'd have a ready answer. Client meetings, team. Bonding. But his eyes wouldn't quite meet mine. The easy intimacy, the comfortable silences we used to share began to evaporate. Conversations felt more functional, less connected. He'd ask about my day, but his gaze would drift towards his phone, his responses automated. The shared laughter felt hollow. One Friday night, curled up on the sofa where we used to spend hours talking, I tried to bridge the growing gap. Mark, you seem really distant lately, I began gently. Is everything okay at work? You seem stressed. He stiffened almost imperceptibly. Just tired, Sarah, he replied, his tone flat. He patted my knee absently, a gesture meant to reassure but felt utterly dismissive. This project is just a lot. His eyes flickered back to the muted TV screen, effectively shutting down the conversation. The knot of unease in my stomach tightened into a cold fist. Something was fundamentally wrong. The foundations felt less like solid rock and more like shifting sand. I didn't have concrete proof, just a collection of unsettling feelings and a growing certainty that the man beside me was becoming a stranger. What was happening during those late nights, behind those closed doors, in those hushed phone calls? The question echoed in the widening space between us. The subtle tremors soon gave way to more noticeable shakes, rattling the carefully constructed walls of our life. Mark's dismissiveness became bolder, tinged with an impatience I hadn't seen before. Our 10th anniversary approached, a milestone I'd been looking forward to celebrating. I'd booked a table months prior at the intimate French restaurant where he first told me he loved me, planning a romantic evening to hopefully reconnect. The day before, he called me from the office, his voice rushed. Sarah, something unavoidable has come up. We need to reschedule the anniversary dinner. My heart sank. Unavoidable? Mark, it's our 10th anniversary. I know, he interrupted, impatience coloring his tone. But Chloe and I are swamped trying to finalize this massive presentation for the board tomorrow. Her input is critical. We just can't break away. The casual insertion of her name, linking her to the reason our anniversary was being cancelled, felt like a deliberate twist of the knife. That night, I sat alone in our large, silent dining room, picking at expensive takeout I didn't want, the empty chair opposite me a stark symbol of the growing void in our marriage. The gaslighting intensified, becoming a disturbing pattern. I noticed a significant charge on our joint credit card from a luxury spa across town, a place known for its lavish couples packages. I'd never been there. When I calmly asked Mark about it, laying the statement on the kitchen island, he sighed dramatically, running a hand through his hair. Must be fraud, Sarah. Call the card company. When I pressed, saying I could call the spa directly, he shifted tactics. Actually, maybe you booked it and forgot? You've been so overwhelmed with that merger at work, honey. Your memory's been a bit fuzzy lately. He delivered it with faux concern, planting seeds of doubt about my own mind. I knew I hadn't booked it. I called the spa. The appointment, a romantic getaway package for two, was indeed booked under Mark's name. When confronted again, he claimed it was a client appreciation gift he'd purchased and forgotten to tell me about. A story so flimsy it was insulting. Then came the receipt. I was searching for some tax documents in his briefcase, something I rarely did, but desperation was making me bolder, when my fingers brushed against a small, crumpled piece of paper tucked into an inner pocket. It was from an exclusive lingerie boutique downtown. The items listed, a sheer black chemise, a lace bra set, were definitely not my size nor my style. Holding it felt like holding undeniable proof of betrayal. That evening, my hands trembling slightly, I laid the receipt on his bedside table. Mark, I said, my voice tight, what is this? He glanced at it, then back at me, his expression hardening instantly. Instead of contrition, there was fury. Are you seriously going through my private things now, Sarah? He exploded, his voice rising. What is wrong with you? You're becoming suffocatingly insecure. Maybe if you weren't so suspicious all the time, I wouldn't feel the need to have any privacy. He stormed out of the room, slamming the door, leaving me reeling from the attack. He twisted it, painting me as the villain, the paranoid wife pushing him away. The atmosphere in our beautiful home became toxic. We moved around each other like wary ghosts, the silence punctuated only by clipped, necessary exchanges. The affection, the easy camaraderie was dead. It was around then that the prenup floated into my consciousness, not as an abstract legal document, but as a potential shield. I remembered insisting on it, my lawyer Eleanor advising tailored clauses beyond the standard division of assets. Clauses addressing breaches of trust. Infidelity. Mark had barely read it, eager to get the unpleasantness over with. Did it hold any power now? The thought felt both desperate and potentially empowering. The storm clouds were no longer gathering. They were directly overhead, dark and menacing. The air crackled with imminent disaster. I didn't know exactly how or when it would break, but the relative calm felt fragile, ready to shatter at any moment. I started sleeping in the guest room. The distance felt safer than the icy expanse in our marital bed. The shattering blow didn't come from Mark directly, but from the hesitant, pained voice of my friend Lisa, over the phone one Tuesday afternoon. Sarah, she began, her voice low, heavy with reluctance. Oh God, I don't know how to say this. I didn't want to be the one. But I saw Mark. My blood ran cold. Saw him where, Lisa? At lunch. That little trattoria near his office, the one with the patio? He wasn't alone. He paused, taking a deep breath. He was with a woman. Young blonde. They were holding hands across the table, Sarah. He was looking at her. The way he used to look at you. Laughing. I took a picture. I wasn't sure if I should send it, but my phone pinged. I opened the message with trembling fingers. There they were. Mark looking younger, happier than I'd seen him in months, gazing adoringly at Chloe. His hand completely covered hers on the table, a gesture so intimate, so possessive, it felt like a physical blow. The world tilted, the floor seeming to drop out from under me. Seeing it, irrefutable photographic proof, vaporized any lingering shred of denial, any desperate hope that I was mistaken. It was real. All of it. The late nights, the secrets, the lies. That evening I didn't scream or cry when Mark came home. The heartbreak was a vast, hollow ache inside me, but something else was crystallizing within the pain. Ice-cold rage. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a campaign of deception, manipulation, and psychological warfare. He had systematically dismantled my trust, made me question my sanity, all while building a new life behind my back. The sheer, calculated disrespect was staggering. I waited until the next morning. Calmly, deliberately, I laid the photo Lisa sent on the breakfast bar next to his coffee cup. Beside it, I placed the spa bill and the lingerie receipt. He stared at them, then up at me, his usual defenses momentarily absent. For a split second I saw a flicker of something. Panic? Guilt? But it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, hard mask. "All right, Sarah," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Yes. It's Chloe. And you know what? It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. I haven't been happy here with this." He gestured vaguely around our beautiful kitchen for a very long time. No apology. No remorse. Just blunt, brutal honesty designed to inflict maximum pain. He immediately pivoted to logistics. "I want a divorce. Let's not drag this out. The prenup makes it simple. We split what we earn together 50-50, keep our own premarital stuff. Clean break." He spoke with chilling efficiency, already mentally packing boxes, dividing assets, his eyes gleaming with anticipation for his untethered future. He seemed almost relieved, eager to shed the burden of our shared life. Then began the public humiliation tour. He wasn't content with a private affair. He needed to parade his conquest. Suddenly, Chloe was on his arm at industry dinners I used to attend with him. He plastered photos of them on social media. Weekends away at charming inns we'd bookmarked, laughing over cocktails at our favorite rooftop bar. He even had the audacity to bring her to a summer block party in our neighborhood, introducing her around with a proud smirk while I stayed inside, blinds drawn, feeling nauseated by the whispers I imagined were circulating. He was deliberately, publicly replacing me, rubbing my face in his perceived victory. He clearly believed the prenup was his safety net, protecting his core assets, assuming his infidelity carried no significant financial penalty beyond the basic split. He thought he was orchestrating a smooth, advantageous exit. That's when the cold rage focused into a sharp, diamond-hard resolve. The prenup. Not just the standard clauses. The special ones. The ones Eleanor had called unconventional but prudent. His arrogance, his desperate need to show the world, and me, how much better off he was without me. He had no idea he was handing me the very ammunition I needed. He was about to learn that the fine print he'd ignored held far more power than he could possibly imagine. And Chloe? She was about to learn that being the younger model came with a very unexpected price tag. The moment I walked into Eleanor Vance's office, the same sharp, no-nonsense lawyer who drafted our prenup over a decade ago, I felt a sliver of control return. Her office, filled with leather-bound books and an air of calm authority, was a stark contrast to the emotional chaos of my life. I sat across from her polished mahogany desk and laid it all out, my voice surprisingly steady despite the turmoil inside. The late nights, the lies, the gaslighting. The photo Lisa sent. Mark's cold confession. And then the piece de resistance. The invoice for Chloe's designer clothes, sent deliberately to my home, accompanied by his cruel note. I detailed his systematic campaign of public replacement, the industry events, the social media posts featuring our places, the neighborhood block party, the use of joint accounts and assets to fund his new life before any legal separation was initiated. Eleanor listened intently, her expression unreadable, occasionally jotting down a note. When I finished, silence hung in the air for a moment. Then a slow, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. It wasn't warm. It was the smile of a predator scenting weakness. "Sarah," she said, leaning forward, her eyes sharp. "Mark's breathtaking arrogance. It might be the most valuable asset we have right now. You specifically asked me about safeguards against this kind of public degradation, remember? Beyond simple infidelity." I nodded, recalling the conversation vaguely. I'd been concerned even then about protecting not just my finances, but my reputation, my emotional well-being should the worst happen. Mark had waved it off, impatient. "It's in Section 7B, Eleanor continued, pulling the digital document up on her large monitor, highlighting the text. "We called it the Lifestyle Continuity and Personal Dignity Clause. Standard prenups focus on asset division upon dissolution. This clause, however," she tapped the screen, "addresses the conduct leading up to the dissolution, specifically in cases of proven infidelity coupled with actions designed to cause public humiliation and emotional distress to the wronged party." My pulse quickened. I leaned closer. What actions? What does it say? It explicitly states, Eleanor read, her voice clear and precise, that if the party initiating the separation due to infidelity integrates a third party into the established marital lifestyle prior to the final divorce decree, using shared financial resources beyond basic living expenses, frequenting established marital social venues with the third party, publicly presenting the third party in a manner suggesting spousal replacement, thereby causing demonstrable harm to the other party's dignity and emotional state, then specific remedies are triggered. Remedies? I whispered, hope warring with disbelief. Significant financial compensation for damages, Eleanor confirmed, calculated based on the flagrancy of the conduct, the duration, the documented emotional impact, and the cost of the marital assets misused. This compensation is in addition to the standard asset split. She paused, letting that sink in before delivering the masterstroke. And Sarah, here's the part you insisted on, the part Mark clearly never registered. If the liable party, Mark, attempts to hide assets, claims inability to pay, or his personal assets are insufficient to cover the full awarded compensation. She met my gaze directly. Liability can be extended, proportionally, to the third party who knowingly participated in and benefited from the pre-divorce integration and misuse of marital assets. Chloe. The blood rushed in my ears. Chloe could be held financially responsible for the lifestyle Mark had been showering her with. Using our money? He's been taking her everywhere, I breathed, the pieces slamming into place with dizzying speed. Using our joint credit cards for her clothes, our travel points for their romantic getaways. She drove the Range Rover last week. That car is in both our names. He paid for her spa treatments, bought her jewelry. He even sent me the damn bill for some of it. Eleanor nodded, a grim satisfaction in her eyes. His need to flaunt her, to humiliate you publicly before legally untangling your lives, is precisely the behavior this clause was designed to address. He didn't just violate the spirit of your partnership. He violated the letter of the contract he signed. And Chloe, by accepting those trips, those gifts, those public appearances funded by marital assets before the divorce, she made herself an accessory to the violation. Mark thought the prenup was a shield protecting his future. He had no idea it contained a perfectly aimed spear. And Chloe, basking in the glow of being the chosen one, was standing right in its path. The game hadn't just changed. It had been flipped entirely upside down. My heartbreak hadn't lessened, but now, it was accompanied by a fierce, righteous determination. Justice was coming. The mediation room felt cold, sterile, despite the expensive furnishings. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a flat, unflattering glow. Mark arrived radiating smug confidence, dressed in one of his newer, sharper suits. He held the door open for Chloe, who swept in clinging to his arm like a trophy. She wore a vibrant, expensive-looking dress, probably one of the items from that fateful invoice, and shot me a glance brimming with poorly disguised pity and triumph. They took their seats opposite me and Eleanor, looking for all the world like the winning team waiting for the final whistle. They thought this was a formality, the last hurdle before they could ride off into the sunset funded by Mark's half of our hard-earned assets. Mark's lawyer, Peterson, a man whose slicked-back hair and overly friendly demeanor screamed shark, launched into his spiel. All right, let's finalize this, he began, shuffling papers. As per the prenuptial agreement executed on June 14, 2010, the division is straightforward. Premarital assets remain separate. Assets accumulated during the marriage, including the primary residence equity, joint investment accounts, and retirement funds accrued during the marriage, will be divided equally, 50% to each party. Mark leaned back in his chair, affecting an air of boredom, occasionally whispering something to Chloe that made her suppress a giggle. He avoided looking at me directly. When Peterson concluded with a flourish, expecting easy agreement, Eleanor calmly placed her thick binder on the table with a soft thud. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden quiet. Mr. Peterson, Eleanor began, her voice quiet but commanding immediate attention. While my client agrees to the standard division outlined in the agreement regarding marital assets, you appear to have overlooked a critical component. Specifically, Section 7b. Peterson blinked, flipping through his copy of the prenup with a slight frown. Section 7b. The personal dignity clause? He waved a dismissive hand. Fairly standard language regarding emotional distress, Eleanor. Difficult to quantify, rarely enforced in practice. Mark shifted, his smug posture tightening slightly. Chloe looked confused. On the contrary, Mr. Peterson, Eleanor interrupted smoothly, her gaze unwavering. This clause is anything but standard, meticulously drafted, and highly specific regarding triggers and remedies. And given your client's documented behavior over the past 6 months, it is eminently enforceable. She opened her binder, revealing neatly organized tabs. We have compiled substantial evidence proving Mr. Hayes's flagrant and repeated violation of this clause. One by one, she laid out copies on the table, turning them to face Mark and Peterson. Credit card statements showing expenditures for Ms. Vance's benefit. Clothing, spa treatments, travel. Charged to joint accounts prior to the filing of divorce papers. Date-stamped photographs and social media posts documenting Ms. Vance accompanying Mr. Hayes to functions and locations established as part of the marital social life, presented publicly as his partner. Airline records confirming the use of marital travel points for trips taken by Mr. Hayes and Ms. Vance. Vehicle tracking data showing Ms. Vance using the jointly owned vehicle. And of course she placed the infamous boutique invoice on top. This thoughtfully forwarded by Mr. Hayes himself. Mark's face began to lose color, draining from tanned confidence to a sickly gray. Chloe's triumphant smile had evaporated, replaced by wide-eyed confusion morphing into dawning horror. Mr. Hayes did not merely engage in infidelity, Eleanor stated, her voice like ice. He engaged in a deliberate public campaign to install Ms. Vance into the marital framework, utilizing marital assets to do so, causing profound and documented emotional distress and public humiliation to my client. Precisely the scenario outlined in Section 7b. So what? Mark finally exploded, slamming his hand on the table, rattling the water glasses. Maybe I wasn't thinking straight. Maybe I was insensitive. It doesn't change the damn asset split. Oh, but it absolutely does, Mr. Hayes, Eleanor countered, her calm a stark contrast to his rising panic. Section 7b stipulates substantial financial compensation for these specific damages, entirely separate from and in addition to the 50-50 asset division. She paused, letting the weight of her words land before delivering the final blow. Furthermore, the clause clearly states that should you attempt to shield funds, plead inability to pay, or your separate assets prove insufficient to cover the awarded damages. Her eyes flicked momentarily towards Chloe, who recoiled as if struck. Liability extends proportionally to the third party, Ms. Vance in this instance, who knowingly benefited from the misuse of marital assets and participated in the pre-divorce integration. A choked gasp escaped Chloe. What? No. That's impossible. I didn't agree to that. Mark lunged forward in his chair, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is insane. You can't do this. She has nothing to do with our finances. Leave her out of this. Your actions inextricably linked her to your finances, Mr. Hayes, Eleanor replied evenly. By accepting lavish gifts, travel, and a lifestyle funded by marital assets before this divorce was finalized, Ms. Vance became a knowing participant under the terms of the agreement you signed. An agreement, she added pointedly, that you apparently failed to read with due diligence. Peterson looked utterly floored, frantically scanning the clause, his slick confidence gone. The air in the room was thick with suffocating tension. Mark was sputtering, incoherent with rage. Chloe stared at Mark, her eyes wide with panic and accusation, tears beginning to well. Eleanor slid a meticulously detailed spreadsheet across the table towards Peterson. This outlines the calculated damages owed by Mr. Hayes under Section 7b. Totaling, she named a figure that made Mark physically flinch, supported by the evidence provided. Then, with deliberate precision, she slid a second document, a formal notice of potential liability, directly in front of Chloe. Chloe stared at it, trembling as if it were coated in poison. The smugness, the triumph, the pity, all gone. Replaced by the stark, ugly face of financial ruin. The satisfaction wasn't just in the impending financial victory. It was in watching their carefully constructed fantasy shatter against the cold, hard wall of consequence. A consequence Mark, in his blinding arrogance, had authored himself. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was devastatingly effective. Mark predictably tried to fight it. Peterson filed motions, argued passionately about the unconscionable nature of the clause, painted Mark as the victim of an overly punitive agreement. But Eleanor had built an ironclad case. The documentation was exhaustive, Mark's own social media posts providing damning timelines. The judge, a stern woman known for her meticulous reading of contracts, upheld Section 7B in its entirety. The financial judgment against Mark was substantial, significantly impacting his share of the marital assets and biting deeply into his personal savings and investments he thought were safely walled off. He was forced into a fire sale of stocks he'd planned to hold long-term and had to relinquish his claim on several valuable pieces of art we'd acquired together. The real fireworks, however, happened between Mark and Chloe. Faced with a legally binding demand to repay the assessed value of the gifts, trips, and other benefits she'd received, a sum that was crippling for someone on an analyst's salary, Chloe completely unraveled. Suddenly, the designer handbags felt like lead weights, the memories of romantic getaways tainted by the looming debt. Their real happiness, as Mark had so smugly called it, imploded spectacularly. Whispers reached me through mutual acquaintances, furious, screaming arguments echoing through the thin walls of the much smaller, less impressive apartment Mark had been forced to rent. Chloe accused Mark of deceiving her, of ruining her financial future, of leading her into a trap. Mark, bitter about the unexpected financial devastation and likely emasculated by the turn of events, reportedly fired back, blaming Chloe for her greed, for readily accepting the lavish lifestyle he'd provided, making her complicit. The shiny new model was suddenly looking rather tarnished and extremely expensive. Last I heard, Chloe was desperately trying to consolidate debt and had taken on a second job waitressing on evenings and weekends. She'd been forced to sell the very jewelry Mark had bought her. The symbols of his affection now just assets to be liquidated to pay back me. Mark's career also took a hit. The messy, somewhat public nature of the divorce fallout damaged his reputation in our interconnected industry. He lost a promotion he'd been counting on. His swagger was gone, replaced by a harried, resentful energy. As for me, the divorce decree felt like an exhale I'd been holding for years. The financial settlement, including the damages paid reluctantly by Mark and in installments by Chloe, wasn't about enrichment. I already had my own financial independence, the foundation I'd built long before Mark. It was about restitution. It was about the enforcement of boundaries he'd arrogantly trampled. It was about reclaiming the dignity he'd tried so hard to strip away. I sold the house, letting go of the beautiful shell that now held too many painful memories. I bought a stunning penthouse condo overlooking the city skyline, filled with light, modern art and absolutely no ghosts. Rebuilding trust in others and even in my own judgment is an ongoing process. The scars remain. But watching the consequences unfold, consequences directly stemming from Mark's own hubris and the foresight embedded in a legal document he dismissed, it brought a profound sense of closure. A quiet, deeply satisfying affirmation that sometimes, karma doesn't need divine intervention. Sometimes, it just needs a well-drafted contract and an antagonist foolish enough to ignore the fine print. My life now is peaceful. It's mine. Built on foundations I control, filled with work I love and friendships that are genuine. And that feeling of solid ground beneath my feet, that's the best revenge of all.